Hello there! Welcome to Heartpanorama, a podcast that will take you on a journey through aspects of everyday life, such as personal development, life hacks, and other relatable topics. My name is Michelle, and I'm excited to share some of my thoughts with you in this podcast series. Today you are listening to a special episode recorded through voice messages that give you an unedited and unfiltered insight on my friends and my thoughts on a chosen topic. While we talk about today's topic, we're mentioning certain brands, products, or services. Any form of product placement in this podcast solely serves discussion purposes and is not paid or sponsored in any way. Hey Annie, I know this is a super random question and I don't know if we ever talked about this, but I was just thinking how weird it is that whenever I speak a different language, I feel like I have a different personality, and I was wondering if you felt the same because you also speak different languages.
Hello, Michelle. Um, I think I don't think it changes completely. It just kind of each language takes a different part of my personality out. For example, I think in French I'm more aggressive, and I like to speak it fast. And in English, I think I'm a little bit more sweet and kind. And in Spanish, I'm more neutral, and it also changes my voice. Uh, and especially, I think in English, it's more it's higher than in Spanish or in French. What about you?
Oh yeah, that makes sense now that you mention it. I realized that I also change my voice whenever I speak in a different language. And I think in German I'm most confident because it's my mother tongue. In English, I think I also speak a bit higher, or I have a slightly higher voice in English than in German, I think. And I don't know about French, to be honest, because I'm a bit out of practice there. But I haven't noticed that you are more aggressive when you speak in French. But I think maybe when you write, it's also different from when you speak it to another person, in real life or via voice message like now. So, that's a good thought actually. Haven't thought about that.
Uh, what I meant is that, for example, I somehow find it easier uh, to complain in French because it's fast and it sounds like a lot, but it actually isn't. This like in English or even Spanish. Um, and not and well yeah and the way you write it is, I think the French is the sweetest one, and probably Spanish would be the most aggressive one in writing characteristics. In English, I think I somehow can express myself more. I don't know. There are more ways. And for example, it happens that you want to say something and you just think about it in English, and you don't know how to translate it or how to um, interpretate it in Spanish or in French or in German, and you are like, okay, this is this word, but how do you the meaning, of it, and there's no way to say it, and if you do find a way, then it's there are a lot of words.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that sometimes you can't express something in a certain language, but you find the words in another language. Because yesterday at work, I was reminded by a part of a show that I subtitled that, for example, we in German, we sometimes use English sentences or English phrases. For example, in the middle of the sentence, the person of the show said no pressure in English. And I was like, okay, if you said that in German, it would sound really lame. And if you say it in English, well, people pay attention to it more, I think. And it's interesting that they use that. Oh, and also, what I notice is that sometimes when I talk to my friends and in German and I don't know how to phrase something because it's so complicated in German, then I would just use an English word or an English phrase.
Oh yeah, that thing about saying something in a language and then translate it into another one, and and well, first trying to to say the same meaning, but also if you say it literally, it doesn't um it doesn't make that much of an impact, or is not this. I don't know. It's I think that's because of the culture. Um, because I don't know how to say it. Um, that you um, for example, there are times that things in English sound better than they do in Spanish. And in Spanish, they sound so stupid, and you're like, no. For example, oh, I found an example. Movies in they I think worldwide they have to translate the movie in a way that calls the attention of the of the people of the um I forgot the word, yeah, of the people, of the customers, um and they don't translate the movie as it is, they translate it. They interpretate it, but if they had translated the same thing as it is in Spanish, it would sound horribly stupid, and people wouldn't take it serious.
I think you're right, but sometimes I notice it not only in movies or series, but also when I speak to my friends and I want to say something in particular and it will sound really dumb in German. Or if I don't know how to phrase it in German, and then I would just use the English word. Or, for example, in German, we also have a lot of French, um, I don't know, not sayings, but some sort of uh, yeah, words that we use from French. For example, en masse, when we mean there's a lot of it, and it would just sound stupid in German. So that's why I use the other word. And as for movies, I actually recently read in a book where someone talked about how German movie titles are just way different than the original titles. They're so ridiculous sometimes. And yeah, that's also funny because why can't you just use the original title? Because sometimes they don't translate the title into German, just use another English title, and that's just weird because you could just go and take the original title.
But sometimes there's a disadvantage because of saying, when you can say something in English. Well, for example, here in Mexico, not many people know English that well. It depends on which part you live, but for example, you can't say something like that in English like you can in Germany. because they don't know the language, so they don't know what you're saying and you don't know how to say it, and that sometimes is a very big wall that stops you from saying something. um, and and especially keeping the meaning. And other thing is, for example, oh yeah, here in sometimes in Mexico, what they do is um, keeping the name in English of the movies and then putting the translation right in front in Spanish. So, for example, uh, what? Oh, for example, do you know Iron Man? The first movie was called Iron Man, and then Iron Man in Spanish, which was El Hombre de Acero. So that was. I mean, it's just very stupid, honestly.
Yes, I agree with the point that some people might not understand English, but I think nowadays, at least in Germany, they mostly can understand the basic English words or phrases because now also I think children in elementary school already learn English here. So most of the people understand it, and I think only older people have trouble with English. And maybe it's part of the culture because somehow I think since I was in kindergarten or so, most people here knew basic English, and it was always possible to I don't know, build in English words or sentences into something. Doesn't matter if it was a movie or a TV show or a book or I don't know. Um, Maybe it's because of music, because a lot of English music is popular here, and I think the German music is like it's I don't know. I don't want to say something wrong, but I talked about that in my podcast about music, um, where I said there is some sort of German music that is like traditional, and not everyone likes it because, at least for me and my friends, most of us listen to English music, like English lyrics, and we understand everything. And maybe it has something to do with that because I think in other countries it's not so normal to just listen to English music, but to their own mother tongue. I don't know if that has something to do with that. And as for the movie titles, it's similar here, but I feel like most of the weird movie titles come from the books. Like, if a movie is based on a book, then they usually take the title of the book or the translated book, and then they try to mix the German title with the English one, so people know what the movie is actually about, or that the people know that the movie is actually based on that particular book, because most people know the German book title and not the English one. So maybe that's a reason, but I have no idea why they do something like that. Because, like I said, sometimes there are new movie titles that are in English, but they're just for the German audience, and it just makes no sense. So yeah. But it's a really interesting topic to compare how different languages are involved in our everyday lives, especially if we're not in English speaking countries. I think someone from the US or from Canada or the UK or Australia, I think they might have a totally different perception of everything. And I would actually like to know how people perceive this because I don't want to ramble too much, but I'm wondering if they also have some sort of this, I don't know, experience that other languages that aren't English influence their everyday lives. So, I would have to ask my friends about that. But it was fun talking to you about this topic, and thank you for discussing this with me.
Yeah, it was very fun to doing this podcast like this, especially because of the environment we are in while recording. Um, but yeah, I believe every language is influenced by others since it was originated. So yeah, for example, I think in all around the world there are some words in each language that you know, and only natives know. But yeah, it would be a funny thing if you asked your friends to little words like that. But yeah, it was very fun. Thank you for inviting me and for allowing me to make this podcast with you.
Yeah, I also thought it's quite fun to try out this form of podcast because we recorded this over the course of several days and didn't really have a plan what to talk about, except a single topic. And I think we could try that out more often. And I hope our conversation makes sense because sometimes I felt like I didn't remember what we started to talk about. So I hope all this makes sense. And yeah, thank you again for joining me. And I think we can talk a lot more about this topic, but yeah, the podcast has some sort of a time limit, I think, because if we keep rambling, then it might get boring. So I hope we can discuss this further, maybe in the comments with the other people who are interested. That was today's episode of Heartpanorama. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a like and leave a comment. Stay tuned for upcoming podcast episodes by subscribing to my channel and activating the notification bell. Check out the links in the description to find out where else you can find me and my podcast. Have a nice week and take care. Until next time, bye!